Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are tackling one of the most intense educational paths you can possibly take. We're talking about becoming a veterinarian by getting your degree outside of your home country. And this isn't just, applying to college. It's about a whole separate ecosystem of visas, complex global accreditation, and yes, a massive amount of financial planning. So our mission today is to pull together a definitive roadmap from all the material we've got. We want to break down the logistics into clear, actionable steps and, more importantly, figure out what the payoff is that makes all this complexity worthwhile.
Exactly. And when we say studying veterinary science abroad, we're really focusing on enrolling in a program outside of, say, North America. We're looking at these high standard places like the UK, parts of Europe, Australia. And the payoff, like you said, it has to be huge to justify the headache. It's not just about getting a degree. It's about getting access to different disease models, maybe better infrastructure, and clinical or research experience that just immediately sets you apart.
I think that's the perfect place to start. What are the specific, measurable advantages that these international programs really offer? The things that make it all worth it. Let's unpack that skills boost you mentioned.
It's fascinating, actually, how much it changes your whole professional identity. The sources point to three really big game-changing advantages. First, you get what they call a global mindset.
A global mindset. What does that mean in practice?
It means you learn how different countries handle things, whether it's managing endemic livestock diseases in rural Europe or dealing with, unusual pet populations in a dense Asian city. It just gives you new ways of thinking about everything from disease control to emergency public health.
So it's kind of like a mandatory diversity training for your medical brain. Instead of learning one textbook answer, you're seeing 5 different real-world approaches.
Precisely. And that flows right into the second advantage, which is superior clinical skills.
Mhm.
A lot of these programs, outside the typical North American model, they push for intense hands-on experience really early on.
So less time in the lecture hall, more time in the clinic.
Way more. We're talking extensive clinical rotations, lab sessions, field work. It all starts much earlier in the curriculum. That kind of rigorous practical prep means graduates are often just better equipped to handle real cases right out of the gate.
And for those who are interested in the really cutting-edge stuff, the specialties, there's a big research advantage too, right? The sources mention some specific examples.
Absolutely. That's the third major draw. Advanced research access. Just think about it. Many of these universities abroad are directly linked to government-funded national research projects. For instance, some UK schools are, world leaders in researching exotic pet diseases or specific infectious outbreak models, things you just won't find in a standard regional program.
So if you want to specialize in something like animal genetics or wildlife conservation,
Then those advanced labs and those institutional connections are, frankly, indispensable.
and we can't forget the networking. Your professional circle instantly becomes global. You're connecting with peers and mentors who operate under completely different systems. That kind of contact list has got to be priceless later on.
It is. When you put it all together, that blend of global skills and a global network is what gives you a real head start. You're not just training to be a vet in one town. You're being trained for a global health career.
Okay, so the payoff is huge. We get that. But let's talk brass tacks. The paperwork, the financial hurdles. Once you've decided why you want to do this, the next question is where? The material we read was very clear that your choice of location has to fit your long-term goals. So what do the top destinations offer?
This is where you have to be really strategic.
Yeah.
Let's start with the UK. It's known for just, incredibly rigorous academic standards and very organized training. A big part of their system is that early clinical experience. The key draw, though, is that a lot of UK schools are approved by major international bodies, which can make it a little easier to practice back in North America later.
A little easier. The UK is also notoriously expensive, especially for international students. How does that compare to somewhere like Australia?
That's a critical point. The tuition and the cost of living in London or Edinburgh can be astronomical. It's a high-risk, high-reward choice. Australia, on the other hand, often offers a similar academic standard, and it's an English-speaking environment, which is a big plus for many. But Australia's real unique selling point is its focus on wildlife and livestock. You get tons of practical experience with farm animals, pets, and, crucially, native wild animals. That's essential if you're passionate about conservation.
Okay, so the UK for that traditional clinical rigor, Australia for conservation and unique species. Where does Canada fit into this?
Canada is a very balanced approach. The vet programs there are respected globally, they have great research options, and their patient care is very high-tech, closely aligned with U.S. standards. Plus, they have updated teaching hospitals and, importantly, clear pathways to work in Canada after you graduate if you want to stay. The downside, the competition is just brutal for a tiny number of spots.
And then there's the cost-conscious option, Germany.
Right. Germany is really attractive because of its public universities. Tuition costs are extremely low, sometimes even zero, compared to the UK or the US. Their programs are very research-heavy, very scientifically rigorous. But, and this is a huge but, for any real clinical work, you have to be highly proficient in German. There's just no way around it. You have to talk to animal owners and clinical teams in the local language.
That's a crucial distinction. Okay, let's get into the bureaucracy. What are the key documents and academic standards that can make or break an application?
Basics are pretty universal. You need high grades in science, biology, and chemistry are non-negotiable, often physics or advanced math too. And if the program is in English, you'll absolutely need validated scores from a test like IELTS or TOEFL. If you're looking at Germany or France, you have to prove you can speak the local language.
And for the documents themselves?
You'll need your transcripts, strong letters of support, a detailed CV that shows all your animal handling experience, and a copy of your passport. But the single most important piece of paper is your statement of purpose, or SOP. This is your story. It has to explain why you want to be a vet, and critically, why you want to study in that specific foreign country. It has to show you've really thought this through.
Let's pivot to the biggest headache for everyone, the money. Even with Germany's low tuition, the overall financial burden is still massive. What are the costs that students tend to overlook?
The variables are huge. Tuition is the big one, of course, highest in the UK and Australia. But even if you save on tuition in Germany, the cost of living in Berlin or Munich is staggering. Housing, food, transport, it all eats up a budget so fast. You have to calculate those living costs with extreme realism.
And beyond rent and groceries, what are some of those hidden costs that pop up later?
There are a lot of them specific to vet studies. You'll need specialized equipment, good lab coats, a stethoscope, maybe a surgical kit. There are mandatory health things like vaccinations that could be expensive. And a big one is mandatory field work. You might have to travel, maybe even internationally, and pay for flights and accommodation yourself. And of course, you need comprehensive health insurance to meet your visa requirements.
That sounds pretty daunting, but there are ways to offset this, right? What did our sources say about financial aid?
Yeah, relief usually comes from three main places. First, there are merit-based university scholarships. These are often given automatically to top applicants and can take a big chunk out of tuition. Second, some governments offer loans or aid to international students, but that really depends on the country.
And the third?
The third is looking for specialized aid from nonprofits or animal health foundations. These groups often give funding to students who are specializing in high-need areas like large animal practice or public health. You have to apply for them separately, but they can be a huge help.
That does make those high-cost countries feel a little more within reach if you plan ahead. So now that we know the requirements and the financial risks, let's walk through the application pipeline. How can you make this high-pressure process feel a bit more manageable?
I think breaking it down into a 7-step process is the best way. Step 1, create your college shortlist. And this has to be based on more than just a name. You need to look at the course structure, the research focus, accreditation, and, non-negotiably, your budget.
Step 2 is probably establish clear deadlines. I know for vet school, they can be unforgiving, starting almost a year in advance. Step 3, get all your documents ready early. That means ordering transcripts and booking language tests way before you think you need them.
Exactly. Step 4 is writing and rewriting that statement of purpose. It's not enough to say you love animals. You have to show you have a professional plan. Step 5, submit everything through the online portals and double-check everything. Step 6, prepare for the interviews. They really use these to gauge your motivation and see if you have a realistic understanding of what being a vet is all about.
And finally, step 7, review and accept the offer. You have to read the fine print and respond quickly to lock in your spot. It sounds simple when you list it out, but the pressure is immense.
It is, and that structure is vital. But let's be realistic and talk about the hurdles, because even with perfect planning, there are about 6 common problems that nearly every international student runs into. We've talked about cost and competition, but number 3 is mission critical. licensing and degree recognition problems when you get back home.
This has to be the single biggest trap. You spend 5 or 6 years and hundreds of thousands of dollars only to find out your degree isn't recognized where you want to practice.
Precisely. If your school isn't accredited by, say, the AVMA in the US and Canada, and many excellent schools in Europe are not, you have to go through a very long, very expensive equivalency process. We're talking about exams like the ECFVG or PAVE. These are tough multi-stage exams that can add years and a lot of financial stress before you can legally practice.
That detail is so important. It's not just one extra test. It's a whole second qualification process that often includes hands-on clinical assessments back in your home country. What about the other more personal challenges?
Those are just as draining. There's the intense cultural adjustment, the language barriers, and just general social adaptation. That feeling of isolation on top of the academic pressure of vet school, it leads to a lot of mental and emotional stress. And finally, some students face this uncertainty about whether the super specialized training they got abroad will even be useful back home.
Okay, so let's turn those problems into actionable advice. The sources gave a bunch of tips, but what are the absolute must-dos to avoid the biggest risks? I'd say number one is do relentless homework on accreditation. If you want to practice in North America, you have to prioritize AVMA-approved schools or at least know the full ECFVG timeline before you even apply. Second, be hyper-realistic about your budget. Assume everything will cost 10 to 15% more than you think.
I agree. And third, prioritize schools with strong, documented clinical exposure. That hands-on experience is what will really make you stand out. Fourth, proactively take care of your mental health. Find support networks early on, whether it's through the school or with other international students.
Right.
And fifth, focus on those long-term licensing goals from day one. Start researching the equivalency exams right after you enroll. And finally, just be open-minded and flexible. Cultural adaptation isn't a failure, it's part of the reason you went in the first place.
The sources gave some great real-world examples of this, like Manjunath, who had to provide all this financial documentation for his German student visa. He had to prove he had a year's worth of living expenses in a locked account before he could even get on the plane. Knowing that early saved him a huge delay.
Or Shwetha, who specifically chose an Australian program because it had AVMA accreditation. It cost more upfront, but it made her path back to North America so much simpler. The message is clear. A little research at the beginning prevents massive headaches down the road.
So if we were to summarize the main finding here, it's that studying vet science abroad gives you access to a global standard of education that few domestic programs can match. But it's trade-off. It demands just meticulous planning to overcome those really complex licensing and cost hurdles.
It's an immense commitment, for sure, but the career paths that open up are incredibly diverse. With that global perspective, you're not just qualified to be a local pet vet. You could be a field veterinarian for rare species, move into high-impact wildlife conservation, become a researcher on global diseases, or even work in public health for international organizations.
So at the end of the day, the decision to do this connects back to the why. It's for people who want the most advanced, most diverse skill set possible to really make a difference.
Absolutely. And that brings us to the core ethical challenge that was mentioned in the sources, this idea of brain drain. If you come from a region that has really high animal health needs and you gain all these amazing skills abroad, how can you ensure that knowledge is applied to benefit animal health in both your host country and your home region? That's the real question of responsibility facing this next generation of global vets.
A truly challenging thought to leave you with. Thank you for joining us for the deep dive. We'll see you next time.